You're on it. We looked at how great God is when we were looking at the lilies, the water lilies, and that environment around them, and how God engineered that beautiful water lily to thrive in its environment, and how he made that full world under the water, and how the psalmist thought this is full of these innumerable creeping things. So we want to look at how great God is today, and we're going to look at, let's get this slide up here. What is that? Does anyone know what it is?
A windshield during a car wash.
Okay. Very soapy, so that it looks like
Tapioca.
okay, yeah.
No.
We're missing it all. Just that white pillowy thing.
The grand finale.
Let me give you a little farther away look. Wow.
Fishing.
Surprise, surprise, it's a buttercup. And behind the scenes, our great God engineered the buttercup with that white pillowy stuff as part of the story. And I happened to discover this because of a caterpillar that was uncovering the white pillowy layer, because he thought the yellow layer was good to eat. So we want to talk about the buttercup and how they're a brilliant reflection of the Creator's design. And you have to, think about how this flower does that, how it produces that brilliant yellow color. And of course, Wikipedia has the answer, right? Petals are modified leaves. And right there, modified leaves. So inherent in that modified leaves is this story that scientists are telling us, even in Wikipedia, and it's prevalent in our society, that 50 million years ago, whenever it was, how many millions of years ago, at the great council of the first flowers, the first flower council, the flowers got together, and one of them says, hey, the bees don't even notice us, that like what can we do to attract the bees? And someone says, I heard it from the bee's knees, we should get rid of our ugly fingers. They're scary, and besides they give the bees blisters, so let's round them off or something, if we would round them off, maybe. How's that, would that work? Maybe. Wouldn't be so scary. And I'll have blisters. And then another one pipes up and said, well, we should add a little color to it, and yellow. Let's do yellow, right? Because I like yellow. Is that the way it happened? Well, there's a lot of people even in our circles who, science knows the answer, right? And the Bible, God's not big enough to really figure this out, how to do this. So there was, God called the angels together, and, how many millions of years ago? And at the first council of the first flowers, and God says, there's a problem here. The buttercups and the flowers, they need some help attracting the girls. I mean, the bees. And anyone have any ideas of how we could help them out? And one of the angels pipes up and says, well, if you'd get rid of those ugly fingers and kind of round them off. And another one says, hey, let's make our flowers kind of rounded off so they're not so scary. And another angel pipes up and says, yeah, add some color to it. And God says, I like yellow. And let's look at what God created, and let's look at it through the eyes of His Word, and that they are engineered by Him, and He's a great God that designed everything in wisdom. And let me tell you the story of how beforehand, you all have buttercups around here. I seen some driving down the road just a few miles. And so before you all go home and let your children, or even do it yourself, and pick buttercups, and you look like this. See, buttercups are chemically protected, and they cause blisters when you squish them and whatever. And that's a serious medical cases there, but it makes the point. That's from buttercups. Right, exactly. Buttercups are chemically protected, and so people will use it for rheumatism and stuff like that. So that, put a bunch of them and wrap them around their ankles or something, or their feet where their feet hurt, and ouch. And allergic reactions, stuff like that. But you can get blisters from them. So how I decided to geek out on buttercups, I have to tell you a story. When I was a young fella at Grandma's house, Grandma liked to take photos, and I like to climb trees, and so it works out great, because now I have lots of photos from way back when. I like to climb the tree here, and she took this photo, and now I have a memory of this field here and these fence posts. And just down the way from those fence posts was one of my forts here. This was a lilac bush with lots of branches growing up. How many had forts when you were young? Yeah, look at that. It's almost ubiquitous here. Well, that was one of my forts, and there was cattle in this field, in this pasture here. And sometimes I'd go in there and the cattle had seen me go in, and so there was this line of them, and they were all staring at me like you guys are, except I don't remember what color they were. They were cattle, but the field was yellow. I remember that bright yellow. And I was supposed to give a talk last summer at a creation seminar about all things bright and beautiful. And I was like, yellow buttercups. They're bright and beautiful. And here's kind of the view like I would have had from my fort. But it was more like this, because the cattle would eat it off and the horses would eat it off, but not the buttercups, because they're chemically protected. And that's just what a buttercup-filled field looks like. And I was doing a butterfly collection at the time for all things bright and beautiful. And I was like, man, butterflies are designed, produce these beautiful colors. I wonder what the deal is when Jesus said, consider the lilies. Maybe I should be considering the lilies, because what did Jesus say about the lilies? Well, he said there, I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these, or dressed like one of these. And just so you know, I looked it up, and there's people that say that the buttercup is actually, there was a buttercup in Israel, that's what he was talking about. So another good reason to talk about the buttercup, because this is maybe what Jesus was talking about, the exact flower. So how is a king dressed? Well, I rounded up some gold and diamonds, some real treasure, and I laid it beside this ugly, chewed up buttercup, and wow, like it's got the gleam, it's got the yellow, like pow, yellow, and the flash of the diamond there. It's just, I think Jesus was onto something. I mean, he should know. He made them, right? And in Kings, Solomon had this visitor, the Queen of Sheba, and she came to see Solomon's house he built, the food on his table, and the seating of his officials, and the attendance of his servant, and their clothing, and his cupbearers, and his burnt offerings, and there was no breath left in her. It just took her breath away. Like how he was dressed, and how he was arrayed, how he was like decked out. And so he probably had purple on, right? And a golden crown and diamonds and emeralds. And well, so I found purple. I think, King Solomon would have really appreciated running around in a purple pansy robe, because that is purple right there. If he could make that color, if they could have, he would have wore a purple pansy. And they do make, I did find that they do make robes and clothes out of flowers, and butterfly wings for that matter, and spider webs. Well, surprise, that's what a purple pansy petal looks like in the microscope. Now that's folded over, like I took the petal and folded over, so here at the top you're actually looking along the edge, the folded over edge. And it's not what you expect, right? It doesn't look like a modified leaf, really. And I'll point out there's iridescence going on here, it's pretty neat. And here's close-up so you can see that iridescence and all these like, what are those mountains that look like that? I don't know, it looks like a mountain range. The Tetons. That looks like the Tetons right there. And here's farther away, it looks like that cow's tongue that was standing there and looking at me, and or what a calf's tongue feels like if you just stick your hand in there and let it suck on your fingers. This is another petal. Here's another one looking at that folded over edge, different kind of flower. I think this is a cone flower. Here's a daylily, in case, it was actually a lily that we're talking about. And this is very flat but long, and there's a lot of iridescence going on here. It's kind of interesting. There's a cone flower. I wonder what those look like. There's some of them out here by the chapel, Be fun to put them in here, take pictures of it, and I have some up here for afterwards if anyone is interested in looking at, what the different flower petals look like in the microscope, because there's a whole variety, because our God fills everything and he just specializes in variety. Interestingly, insects can't see red. So, if you'd like science experiments, this is one I did with the teachers at Teachers Week. So we put out pan traps, a yellow one, a white one, a blue one, and a red one. Put it in soapy water, set them all at the same location, and a day later, yellow wins. God must like yellow, or bees, or insects, whatever. White, that's second place. Blue is third. Red loses. There's like one or two things in there. Like it just totally lost. Insects can't see red. Who knows why. So God designed the buttercup with this pure, bright yellow. And I don't know, have you ever done that? Pick a buttercup. You handle buttercups, did you?
Yeah.
You went up to your wife there and said, "Do you like butter?" Or somebody, and you know, it shines yellow under their chin. Yeah, you like butter. They're so reflective that if you hold your hand over it, you know, it'll light up the inside of your hand. Here's another shot. You can see the yellow, that golden glow inside the shadow of your hand. And every picture that I have, I like photography, and I hate burned out stuff. Look at that, just burnt out. Let me back up. Burnt out. There it is again. But that's actually a design feature. Those highlights there are caused by a very thin flat layer, and it's also highlighted by the wrinkles. If you notice, the petals are all wrinkled. And so that thin flat layer with the wrinkles then is like ka-chow, right? Ka-chow, I've got this bright flash that I'm, you know, and at different angles there's going to be that brilliant white blinding flash that burns out your photos. And here's the discovery of the, you know, the caterpillar feeding on this, and another shot. Here he is busy. And I just noticed that white inside, and that gave me the idea to do this setup where I, you know, jury rigged so I could look down into the cross section of the leaf. And it is brilliant white, blindingly white inside that yellow. And thanks to the caterpillar, I got to see that. And that is white because of these special starch granules that scatter the light and reflect it. And it scatters light like a waterfall. So now when you look at a buttercup and that brilliant yellow, you can think of the white of a waterfall, kind of behind the scenes kind of thing. Those air bubbles and the water droplets are reflecting light, scattering light in all directions, and it gives it that white. Or, you know, the bubbles in a riffle, or the white of clouds. Another thing that helps the buttercup, it's a design feature, it's an engineering feature that our great God gave the buttercups, is this parabolic shape. It's kind of bowl-shaped. It focuses the light towards the viewer, and it focuses the sun's rays, and so insects like to bask in that. And they say it actually helps the developing seeds because of the warmth from the sun's rays being concentrated there, just like a parabolic mirror, or they used to have the satellite dishes. And another thing that the buttercups do is they're heliocentric. They follow the sun, and they close up at night. So this is early morning, and I wasn't about to set my Nikon out there all day long to take a series of photos, so I cheated. And so I had to put this bar here so you can see that, watch the progress of this as it follows the sun. So give me a little grace on this, what do you call a series of pictures to show something happening. Anyway, here it goes. It follows the sun as it crosses the sky. So those flowers are slowly, moving, turning so they can follow the sun, so that it can reflect and be brilliant yellow all day long. And so, out of curiosity to see what on earth is inside those flowers and what makes it work, I squeezed a petal between two pieces of carrot and put it in my microtome, and here I am slicing it with a straight razor. Do a whole bunch of little thin, tiny little slices and put them in a microscope slide in a drop of water, and I got one that I could see a cross section. So here you can see that thin flat layer across the top, And think about the leaf that we looked at just yesterday, you know. It had a palisade layer of all those vertically stacked green cells. They were green because of the chlorophyll. The story is the plants got together, you know, and modified the leaf to make it thin and flat up there. And I don't see any chlorophyll there. And I see yellow, and I see this dark band here. Well, that dark band is dark because I'm using a light microscope and I'm shining the light up through the cross section, the thin section, and it's so reflective that it's reflecting the light, and so you can't see anything. It's reflecting it down. And then here's the mesophyll, the spongy layer, and specialized cells and some more pigments that reflect yellow. And here's someone's diagram of how this works. And so you have that extremely smooth surface, and you have the yellow pigment, and these light rays are being reflected, and they're being amplified by being in sync. You know, have you ever used noise canceling headphones when you're out shooting your gun or something? So, you know, the sound waves, if they're together, it's louder, and if you play them, you know, opposing like this, then they cancel each other out. So that's kind of happening with this layer right here. They're in sync, and that amplifies the light waves, the yellow light waves that you can see because they're being reflected and they're bright because of that. And then here's those starch layers. They're bouncing the light around and scattering in all directions, and that helps with the brilliance and with that nice yellow that we see. And so does the rest of the flower there. And, you know, the guy that did this, he's summing up this study, so this is his interpretation of it, and I think he did a pretty good job. I would take a little bit of whatever with this iridescent here, although I guess that maybe is a secondary definition, and we use iridescence when it's, you know, all peacock colors, right? And this is yellow, but it is a lustrous yellow, so it could be maybe secondarily called iridescent. But this is what we were just saying here, and here's the study if you want to look up the functional optics of glossy buttercup flowers. I just compare that to like the purple pansy. And then you think about all the flowers that are out there, all the variety, and, you know, everything has a story, and you know, you could explore all the different ways all these flowers produce those colors that we see, and think about our great God and how the psalmist says, and how we want to say, that our God created all these things in wisdom. And everything has a story, right? If you look at the buttercups, you'll see there's visitors. They're being attracted by those colors, the signals, the flashes, the yellow signals that we can't see. They know there's a reward there. They're getting pollen, they're transporting pollen, and even these look like gall wasps, tiny little gall wasps. They might be feeding on it. I don't know what they were doing there, but they are definitely pollinating there. You can see pollen stuck all over them. Even a spider here. Now, is a spider an enemy or a friend? Well, it depends, you know. If it catches a bee or a pollinator, then I guess you kind of could consider it an enemy. But everything has its friends and enemies, and here you can see pollen stuck on one of the spider legs, so maybe it would actually contribute to the pollination and be a friend in that way. There's an enemy, so a plant bug, you know, feeding on the developing seeds. And here's technically an enemy, I guess. Aphids and the ants, they're enabling the aphids by farming them, so they probably moved them there and they're milking them for the honeydew. Don't try it, by the way, it's not honeydew, it's they drink a lot of liquids to get their nutrition, okay? So that's what that is, the honeydew. But ants love it. And so they'll, drag them to the next plant if they need to for better country. They'll eat them if they need some, extra whatever. They protect them. Stick your finger up there and you'll get attacked probably. So yeah, there's a story, there's this whole community that goes along with these flowers that God created. Slugs, they do a lot of damage to the flowers. Some kind of beetle sign there, window feeding. Maybe slugs, I don't know what did that. But they're chemically protected, so not everything eats it, right? If they weren't chemically protected, everything would eat it, including us, and then maybe there wouldn't be buttercups for us to enjoy. So that toxin is a protoanemone. How's that one? Or renunculin, it's called. And it causes all kinds of trouble, besides just those blisters, like nasty. But there's also, plants have their chemicals, their chemical defenses, and they have, uses. Like here's a test tube, experiment showing that this renunculin or this protoanemone can actually be an antifungal agent. Oh, so see, God has a reason for everything, and the things He does, like it has many uses, so it's an antifungal agent for the plant, so it doesn't rot as fast, and it keeps the cows from eating it, and keeps people from picking lots of, handfuls of them, they say some of the uses, the traditional uses, anti-rheumatic, rubefacient, it may have uses against fever and rheumatism and, to increase your circulation. Wow, God is offering good uses for this chemical defense, so you can just broaden out to in many ways how we can use God's wisdom, and we can just remember the yellow, brilliant yellow in the field, and ask ourselves, how are the buttercups dressed finer than King Solomon? Well, he gave him that flat cuticle layer there, and the air gaps, which I didn't talk about, but that contributes to that gloss and that brilliant reflectivity. And the wrinkles, so that they have those extra flashes, so they can ka-chow the bees as they fly past. And the pigments, to absorb the blue and reflect that yellow. And the starch cells for that, that reflectivity. So behind the scenes, that white layer is helping to make that brilliant yellow, intense yellow, and the reflecting pigmented lower layers that help pass those light waves through, giving those light waves all the chance they can to produce the yellow. And then parabolic shape, and they follow the sun. And it all comes down to who dressed the buttercups, so we can enjoy God's creation and the buttercup's brilliant yellow. Jesus told us, because he knows, he did it, and now we know behind the scenes what was going on at the waterfall. Any comments or questions about buttercups?
Are you saying they're ranunculus?
That's the species name, ranunculus, something like that. So there's other There's other ones like the monk's hood in the flower beds there, the purple flowers. They're the same family. That was the leaves here that were passing as the scary fingers for the first council of flowers. Thanks for your attention, and enjoy the buttercups and our great God and His amazing creation. And if you have an interest in exploring the flowers here, flower petals in the microscopes, you can take a peek. And I'm going to try to put up on the screen here as we look, in case you're milling around and visiting and happen to see, you might be able to see what's going on up here and don't have to squeeze around the microscope. Thanks again.
Thank you.